When this man was on the campaign trail, we tried with every bone in our being to be objective and to report on him in a fair, equitable manner. And then when he became president of the United States, the same thing.
Democrats say a lot of things, many of which are untrue, inaccurate, misleading, or selectively omitting relevant information from their story. But no matter how blatant the falsehood, one thing is for sure, Democrats just say stuff.
This president has radicalized so many more people than ISIS ever did. The president has far more supporters who espouse an equally hateful ideology.
I've never heard of one.
Well, okay, so if you're going to be focused on the price of energy, we're not going to have a planet in 10 years.
Hold on. No.
These cuts are blood money. People will die. Let's be very clear. Senate Republicans are paying for tax cuts for the wealthy with American lives.
People more concerned about being precisely, factually, and semantically correct than about being morally right.
But being factually correct is important.
It's absolutely important.
This particular exchange is revealing. The truth is of secondary importance to the story they want to tell. With such belief systems, it's no wonder Democrats are able to get away with just saying stuff.
We're going to see if this reign lasts for 30 days, or 2 years, or 1,000-year Reich.
The Affordable Care Act has made health care more affordable, and it has created access.
The Republican Party right now, not in New Jersey so much, but in Washington, D.C., is having a very different kind of debate. It's having a debate about whether to be a white nationalist party or not. It's having a debate about whether we should sell.
No, it's true.
This GOP tax scam is simply theft. Monumental, brazen theft from the American middle class and from every person who aspires to reach it. The GOP tax scam is not a vote for an investment in growth or jobs. It is a vote to install a permanent plutocracy in our nation.
The plutocracy is centralized government stealing your money and using it for whatever purpose Nancy Pelosi wants to put it to. The idea that it is a theft for the government to not take money out of my pocket is beyond reasoning.
It does violence to the vision of our founders. It does violence to the vision of our founders.
Does she understand that the reason that we fought a revolution is because no taxation without representation? It was literally the slogan of the revolution. Is she aware that one of the reasons people were mad is because Britain kept putting taxes on all of the imported goods? Right, with the Stamp Act and the Tea Act. Like, is she aware of anything remotely related to American history here? Like, the founders would have hated our tax regime. The founders didn't even believe in an income tax. The Democrats have made up an alternative history of the United States in which Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and John Adams and James Madison and Alexander Hamilton were all giant government, centralized government people, which is just patently insane.
80% of households will get cuts in 2018. But according to a Wall Street Journal poll, only 17% believe they are getting a tax cut. The gap between perception and reality is most likely due to media hysteria. The Washington Post, Newsweek, Time Money, and the New York Times all describe the bill as a tax hike on the middle class. In reality, the middle class will receive $61 billion in tax cuts in 2019.
This just shows the left is really not to be taken seriously here. We've really entered into silly season. They're getting basic facts wrong. They don't care that they're getting basic facts wrong.
And they'll say, well, I'm not racist. I just voted for him because, you know, I didn't like Hillary Clinton. And I just want to say that that doesn't make you not racist. It actually makes you racist.
You have to stop demonizing people and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right.
This was a white lash. This was a white lash against a changing country. It was a white lash against a black president in part.
What cost her the election is, if you look at the stats, people, I agree with Van Jones in a sense. This was a white lash. There have been studies, 20% of people voted because of racism. And I think after 20% of people voted because of racism. 8 years support of a black president, there was no way that this woman was going to win.
Twice. The country elected a black president twice because he was a good candidate. She was not a good candidate.
She was the most qualified candidate for president that we've ever had. She was the most qualified candidate for president that we've ever had.
Hillary Clinton has been has put forward more information about herself than I believe any presidential candidate in modern, probably in history. I think we can safely say that.
Now, if we implement a carbon tax on top of that, so that we can transition and financially incentivize people away from fossil fuels, if we implement a carbon tax, that's an additional amount of a large amount of revenue that we can have.
She's just saying a bunch of words.
That Trump, when he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it, and he is relentless. Yeah. He's even though he did what he did this week with the children in the cages, but he's still going to have the internment camps. He's never going to give up on this. Never going to give up on the wall. They are never going to stop. And we never act like that on any of the things that we say we believe in. They are relentless. Right. They are to the core, and we are like, somewhere. So that's how we are, and we have got to stop.
Yeah, they are so lovely. They're so lovely. They're like Judy Garland and Wizard of Oz.
And we never act like that on any of the things that we say we believe in. So that's how we are. And we never act like that on any of the things that we say we believe in. So that's how we are.
I couldn't believe that Maher was sitting there making the argument that the left was more civil. All the incivility was coming from the right. And there's Michael Moore calling us MFs, right? He's right there. He's calling us MFs. And then saying how wonderful and lovely they are. They're singing Over the Rainbow. I cannot believe the self-delusion.
Tens of millions of people voted for him after he showed his cards for years.
But are you suggesting that they're racist, or
yes.
The people who vote, all the people who voted for Donald Trump are racist?
Yes.
25% of the country, whether it's 25, 20, 30%, are hardcore racist. They do not want to see brown people coming into America. That's just what's going on here.
They're going to put you all back in chains.
But doesn't this feel like the prequel to The Handmaid's Tale?
Feels
like,
afraid to watch
this is it. It was like, oh, you ask yourself, how did it get that bad? This is it. It didn't happen in the dark. It didn't happen in a basement. It happened in plain sight for all of us to see. They will make everything legal. They will take away our rights, and they'll actually take away the importance of our vote. So we better start using it before we don't have it.
We as a party have compromised too much, and we've lost too much of who we're supposed to be and who we are. And
the Democratic Party has lost.
I think so. I think we've compromised things that we shouldn't have compromised, whether it's judgeships with Mitch McConnell, whether it's compromising on climate change. I think there are some things that we've compromised a little bit too much on.
Okay, they have not compromised on judgeships. Harry Reid nuked the filibuster, and Mitch McConnell has rammed through judges. And on climate change, Democrats have not compromised one iota. They just haven't had the power to get through their radical agenda. So again, just a bunch of nonsense. But it does demonstrate where the Democratic Party's head is at. They are radical. They don't care about truth.
Are you saying that if Trump wins and a day or two after that, the markets are going down 15%?
10%. I think 10%. It may actually, if it looks like he's close, it may drift a little before, but the net effect will be about 10%.
He has no real strategy for creating jobs, just a string of empty promises. Donald Trump offers no real solutions for the economic challenges we face.
I have my Trump hedge on. In the event Donald wins, I have no doubt in my mind the market tanks.
Donald Trump's ideas about the economy and the world will cause millions of Americans to lose their jobs.
And what happened? What could we ask what happened? Let's because these guys say millions of jobs will be lost. The economy will tank. They're making actual predictions, none of which happened, and yet we still look to them. All of the smart people, all of the serious, sophisticated, they're stable leaders, all of those people were totally wrong.
This is a fact. This is not, unlike some, I actually try to
state facts. I believe in facts. Right? I believe in a fact-based reality and a fact-based politics.
Okay, that is just a lie. He did not believe in a fact-based reality, a fact-based politics. It's just not true. And he says that he didn't lie. He didn't like to fib like some people. Really? How about if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor? How about if the president doesn't have authority to grant executive amnesty? How about those men died in Benghazi because of a YouTube video? How about the Iran deal is being pursued because of a new moderate policy pushed by the new Iranian moderate administration? The president lied every 5 seconds. Barack Obama was a congenital liar. It's just not true. I like when he says that he's based in facts. He's a president of the United States who took Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, which said you're not allowed to discriminate against women, and tried to apply that to men who believe they are women, saying that this was somehow fact-based. Almost nothing that Barack Obama did was fact-based. Almost nothing he did was fact-based.
Kavanaugh, Judge Smith, and her friend, Leland Kaiser, have all said they don't remember anything like this ever happened. And Leland Kaiser, who says she believes Ford, says that she doesn't even remember ever being at a party where Kavanaugh was present.
Right, and that actually corroborates Ford's story, which is that she was so horrified by this that she kind of snuck out or slunk out of this apartment in a way that no one would know what happened because she was so utterly mortified.
Are you following this at home? See if you can track the reasoning here. When your corroborating witnesses can't corroborate your story, the one you say they can corroborate, your story has still been corroborated, maybe even more so.
The last time we had a really major existential threat in this country was around World War II. And so we've been here before, and we have a blueprint of doing this before. We had a direct existential threat with another nation. At this time, it was Nazi Germany and the Axis. And we put hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people to work in defending our shores and defending this.
So she said, just that last bit, she says, we put hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions, to work defending our country. 16 million Americans served in World War II. You'd think if she's going to use this talking point, she would have Googled basic facts of World War II, but that's fine. She says that the strategy to fight the sun monster, the strategy to fight global warming, is the same strategy that we used to fight the Nazis, by which I assume she means evacuate Dunkirk and storm the beaches of Normandy. We've never tried that. We've tried capping fuel emissions, we've tried banning certain plastics, but we've never tried evacuating Dunkirk and storming Normandy, so maybe that will work.
And this is not a wall between Mexico and the United States that the president is creating here. It's a wall between reality and his constituents, his supporters.
What the hell does that mean? A wall between reality and his supporters? Well, how? How? I love that nobody in the media just asked how. Explain.
But what we have not seen before, in our recent public life at least, is politicians just blatantly, repeatedly, baldly, shamelessly lying.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
But what we have not seen before is politicians just blatantly, repeatedly, baldly, shamelessly lying. Making stuff up. Calling up them.
Reid points blame at media bias. In a tweet, she writes, "There is nothing so predictable as media spin in favor of Republicans."
Right.
Really?
But we were talking about Earth. The press is under attack, and right now, if you remove the ability to get the truth out, then you're going to have the destruction of democracy. We don't have any more. There's no checks and balances coming from the Congress. Right now, the courts are holding. But this is the first time in American history where you have a state-run television, Fox, Breitbart, Sinclair, and Alex Jones, aligned with the President of the United States. That's very, very tough. The battle lines have been drawn, and we're going to see whether or not democracy survives.
Yeah, so NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post are all speaking for the deep state. But the real problem in Rob Reiner's mind, this storyteller, because he is a storyteller, he knows.
Look at the way I've been treated lately, especially by the media. No politician in history has been treated worse or more unfairly.
I did want to point out that there have been a couple who have been perhaps treated more unfairly or as unfairly. Let's talk about, I don't know, Barack Obama.
The media treated Obama worse than Trump. Got it.
Conservative silo where they're getting their media from one place, then everyone else getting their media from another. So how can people sort of protect themselves if they're inside that conservative news bubble?
Well, I don't think they want to be protected, unfortunately. All their news from Fox, where they listen only to talk radio, where you really only hear the right-wing point of view from Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity. And if they're looking on the internet, they're reading the Drudge Report or Breitbart. They're in a closed loop where they never hear many facts.
Conservatives, not Democrats, but conservatives are in a closed loop, a news bubble where they only hear their own point of view and never hear any facts.
They hear lies, and so when they hear the same lie over and over again, we know this is called the big lie technique that Joseph Goebbels invented back in the 1930s, and unfortunately it works.
What cost her the election, in my humble opinion, is Russia's hacking. And what cost her the election, in my humble opinion, is Russia's hacking. And
67% of Democrats believe it is definitely true or probably true that Russia tampered with vote tallies in order to get Donald Trump elected. 2/3 of Democrats believe that the Russians actively hacked the election, tampered with vote tallies. And yet we're told that only President Trump is undermining our electoral institutions.
It's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences.
The president would, in effect, be a monarch. The president would be a monarch if Brett Kavanaugh becomes a Supreme Court justice. I don't think Americans want an imperial presidency. Do you?
Just last year, we gave the military a $700 billion budget increase, which they didn't even ask for.
The entire military budget for 2018 is $700 billion. So saying that they got a $700 billion increase is incorrect, if not impossible. The military is always asking for more money. So for Ocasio-Cortez to say that they didn't ask for an increase is just bizarre.
They're like, we don't want another fighter jet. They're like, don't give us another nuclear bomb. You know?
Right. But being factually correct is important.
It's absolutely important.
Among his supporters so far, that does not seem to matter a tremendous amount. They're willing to accept, or they're largely willing to accept what he says as truth. And part of this, in talking to some experts, is the president is sort of floating out trial balloons and setting the stage. So to get someone to believe something that's not true, you can't just announce something. You sort of have to lead them there. You start going after Google. You start going after big tech. So if and when the president does actually roll out an initiative, at least his base and his supporters have been primed little by little to believe that. While his base likes this, sort of people who are more rooted in a reality-based community, for lack of a better word, it increasingly makes him seem unhinged. Sort of people who are more rooted in a reality-based community, for lack of a better word, people who are more rooted in a reality-based community, for lack of a better word.
Conservatives don't live in reality. People more based in a reality-based community, as she says, realize that Trump is unhinged. That's right. The people who say men are women because they say so are the ones living in reality.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am. Once again, ma'am.
I said both of you.
No, you said sir. Once again, it's ma'am.
With its decision that it announced yesterday, the Supreme Court became the Supreme Corp. Their decision does violence to the First Amendment, cheapening it and using it, stretching it as a rationale for this decision.
Okay, so there we go. The Supreme Court is doing violence now. And yet, again, the left will blame Donald Trump for shootings at a Maryland newspaper. So it's all good. It's all good. Everything's fine.
No one's blaming the president. Is anyone blaming the president? But the president now wants to make this about him.
Of course, he played no role in this, but you have to look at this sort of greater context, this atmosphere that he has created in Washington in attacking the media. And you have to wonder if that has contributed to what happened yesterday.
The anchor says no one's blaming Trump for the lunatic who sent bombs to Democrats, and then minutes later, they blame Trump.
No one's blaming the president. Is anyone blaming the president?
You have to look at this sort of greater context, this atmosphere that he has created in Washington in attacking the media. And you have to wonder if that has contributed to what happened yesterday. You know, there's a line, and that it's one thing to be critical of your enemies. It's another thing to say the media is the enemy of the people, that we're intentionally making up false stories.
A local high school is responding to a report that the new Supreme Court nominee founded a group called Fascism Forever. The report comes from the Daily Mail. Georgetown Prep, where Neil Gorsuch attended, released a statement saying no such club ever existed at the campus there in North Bethesda.
Press Secretary Sean Spicer ripped the press for a false report that President Trump had removed the bust of MLK from the Oval Office.
The religious leader disputes the man's claim that his mother died because of President Trump's travel ban.
When he said today, America first, it was not just the racial, I should say racial, the Hitlerian background to it.
First, Kavanaugh was a groper. Then he was a flasher, and then all of a sudden, he was a serial gang rapist or dropped quaaludes and punch bowls. When those stories couldn't stand on their own, Kavanaugh became a partisan hack and a belligerent drunk.
I think this is a potentially more dangerous situation than Watergate.
It's one thing to be critical of your enemies. It's another thing to say the media is the enemy of the people, that we're intentionally making up false stories, An
MS-13 gang member I know about, if they don't reach a certain threshold, I cannot tell ICE about them.
We have people coming into the country or trying to come in. We're stopping a lot of them. But we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals.
What's he talking about? He's talking about MS-13. He's talking about guys who beat people to death with baseball. That's kids, children to death. That's who he's talking about. He calls them animals. Virtually every mainstream news agency tweeted this out as if he were talking about immigrants. Here's ABC. They just took it out of context. They tweeted out the words and that quote without the question from Margaret Mims. ABC News, this is their tweet. President Trump refers to some who cross the border illegally as animals, not people. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. CBS News, these aren't people, these are animals. President Trump used the harsh rhetoric to describe some undocumented immigrants during a California sanctuary state roundtable. NBC News did the same thing. C-SPAN, President Trump during California sanctuary cities roundtable, these aren't people, these are animals. New York Times, a former newspaper, Trump lashed out at undocumented immigrants during a White House meeting, calling those trying to breach the country's borders animals, right? Animals. This is unbelievable. If you don't think, this is what leftism has turned these people into.
That we're intentionally making up false stories.
Said he stood by his comments that the president's attack on the media is the greatest threat to democracy in my lifetime. Now that, of course, is a wild overstatement. That Trump's attack on the media is the greatest threat to democracy in his lifetime. Come on. It's just sheer nonsense.
This morning, I went after some dimwit from NBC, and he goes, "This is the worst attack by the White House on the press freedoms in history." I go, John Adams, second president, put journalists in jail. So did Lincoln. Lincoln, of course, you could say, okay, it's the Civil War, but there have been many cases of attacks on the press. But of course, because everyone's so narcissistic, if it's happening to them, It's the worst thing ever. And this is basically the gulag, even though they can go on Twitter and have their 100,000 followers and have their good book deals.
I think as you go through the reports, you'll see the countries that we criticize for limiting press freedom. It's for things like having criminal libel laws where you can be put in jail for what you say. It's for things like yanking the licenses of media outlets you don't like, or in many cases, killing the journalists. So I think we make quite a distinction between political leaders being able to speak out and say that story was not accurate, or using even stronger words sometimes, and using state power to prevent the journalists from continuing to do their work.
This guy has to explain to the Associated Press the difference between being criticized because your coverage is unfair and being murdered for telling the truth. He's got to explain this to people. I mean, it really is like these guys who got tossed out of Starbucks. It's the same fantasy. They're all living in this fantasy of an oppression and heroism that gives them the right to do awful things to other people who are not doing anything.
What is wrong with them that they give guns to the mentally ill? What is wrong with them that they allow toxins to be dumped in rivers? I mean, we are dealing with people who are trying to hurt us right now.
And I'm told that 70% of women who have been polled say that they want him impeached.
All right. Second Amendment does not apply to AR-15s. It does not apply to assault-style weapons. It never has. Congress may legally ban those weapons without touching the Second Amendment. That's a legal fact.
And when they reach the end of the interview, she finally says she's about to ask him how he's going to pay for any of this. And then, shockingly, they run out of time.
Is how do we pay for them? This conversation, of course, will continue, but we've run out of time, Senator. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, what a pity. Oh, what a pity. Now, it's funny how the conversation always runs out of time at just that point in the conversation.
You know, people, of course, people want free this and free that, but who pays for it? You know, the socialists never talk about that. They never talk about where the money comes from. Whenever you hear Bernie Sanders say, "I happen to believe," it's a rhetorical quirk he has, which is supposed to communicate that he's speaking from the depths of deep morality. But in fact, everything he says after that makes no sense whatsoever.
People often say, like, how are you going to pay for it? And I find the question so puzzling because how do you pay for something that's more affordable? How do you pay for cheaper rent? How do you pay for, you just pay for it. We're paying more now.
You just pay for it. You just pay. The way you double tax receipts to the government is you just do it, just cause.
Questions. Obviously, I didn't put my hands on her or touch her as they're alleging, and it's just unfortunate that the White House is saying this. Obviously, I didn't put my hands on her or touch her as they're alleging.
Donald Trump reminds me in many ways of many African dictators. You know, his demeanor, his style, who he presents himself as, and how he processes his power is something that's all too familiar.
In the occupation of Palestine is just an increasing crisis of humanitarian condition.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
I think what I meant is like the settlements that are increasing in some of these areas and places where Palestinians are experiencing difficulty in access to their housing and homes.
Literally has an international relations degree.
Despicable and truly offensive posts being attributed to me. Now, many of you have seen these blog posts circulating online and in social media. Many of them are homophobic, discriminatory, and outright weird and hateful. But here's what I know. I genuinely do not believe I wrote those hateful things because they are completely alien to me. But I can definitely understand, based on things I have tweeted and have written in the past, why some people don't believe me.
It was evil, Joy Reid. So it's like, what kind of an excuse is that? I wrote these things, but I can't believe it, and I'm shocked, and I will take this up with myself immediately. My only point about this is that only Joy Reid is shocked to discover that she's Joy Reid. Only the press was shocked to wake up the next morning and find we didn't think they were funny. We thought they were low. We thought they were mean. We think that they're dishonest. The polls continually show that people don't trust them. Only the press is shocked by this because they are living in a fantasy. It's the left wing's fantasy of oppression and heroism, and it's simply not real. And when they get caught, and when we see them, we know it's not real, and they're shocked to find out that they're themselves.